I think it's common for the excitement of a new tank to be followed by thoughts of starting another. You find a really cool tank on Facebook Marketplace, and this is the last one. Maybe one more? Two more? Just one more. Okay, this is a me problem, and I've set up 16 tanks in the last 2 years. This video is a tour of all 16 of my current planted tanks and a few mini ponds. The pretty and not so pretty. Okay, let's begin. This was the first tank I bought and set up after my move back home a couple of years ago. After browsing Facebook, I found this one. Brand new and available for a fraction of the price you typically see them sold for. The person selling it had a ton of tanks listed, and I ended up going back several times and have 4 different tanks from that same person you will see in this video. This tank houses a mixture of all different kinds of fish, but at the beginning I knew exactly what kind of fish I wanted in here. Which brings me to the first species in this tank. Harlequin rasboras. Being one of the first species of fish I had ever kept back in high school, they've been a long-time favorite. For me, they are by far one of the best schooling fish that I've personally kept. These little guys have grown a lot in the last couple of years and are definitely the quickest and most active fish in the tank. They're ferocious eaters and are a lot of fun to watch. This is Pearl. Pretty original name, huh? She's obviously a pearl gourami and is a little different because, well, she's a bit stunted. I originally saw her in a local fish store and she was mixed in with a bunch of big paradise gouramis and she was barely bigger than 1.5 inches. I noticed that her dorsal fin was also deformed and curved at the front, which gave her a crazy little hairstyle. I really wanted her at the time, but the tank wasn't cycled yet and I had only come for some plants, so I left her there. 2 months later, I found myself back at the same fish store and there she was, in the exact same tank, but now with some dwarf gouramis that chased her around the tank. I brought her home that day, and while she's grown a lot since I've gotten her, she's nowhere near what she should be. Her dorsal fin has remained curved and definitely hasn't grown too much, but that's a-okay in this household. She has a lot of personality and is pretty much queen of the tank. She does have one gourami friend in here, which is this male sparkling gourami. He is small but fierce, as the last remaining sparkling I have after he killed the other 4. Let's move on to the rest of the community in this tank. The smaller of these 2 is the last survivor from a group I had in a different tank, and the other is a hitchhiker that came in a bag of other fish. I'm not 100% sure if he's an Endler or maybe a mix with a guppy, but regardless, these 2 hang out all day long. This crooked little neon is about 7 years old at this point and is the last of a group of neons that came with me on my last move. Since all the others have passed, I've added another small group of them to keep him company. I also could not say no to a small group of green neons that I found left over at a store after someone else had purchased the other 60 they had in stock. I just didn't want to see them left behind. A case of mistaken identity as she came along in a bag of dwarf emeralds. I would love to get her a school someday when I have space to move her to a dedicated tank, but also 10 out of 10 for being very hard to film. Okay, let's move on to the cleanup crew of this tank. My favorite wood and algae munching little friends. Amanos are the heart of the cleanup crew in this tank and make sure to be the first to food every time. The Amanos in here have munched on the driftwood so much they've made, well, whatever this is. I originally bought a group of these guys to put in a different tank, but could not get them to eat no matter what I offered them. I moved them in here with hopes that they would recover, and unfortunately, only one did survive. This little guy is thriving now and is also an essential member of the cleanup crew. Okay, now I probably have the most not cherry looking cherry shrimp in this tank, but I've only ever purchased mixed colored coals, so this is the result of that now a couple of years later. Personally, I love the wild type coloration, and it does help them stay camouflaged and not get eaten. Alright, I tried to film this guy for a literal week and was very unsuccessful, so enjoy this terrible footage. This is another one that has been with me for many years now. He's the last of a group I had over 5 years ago, and he now spends his days cruising along the sand at the back of the tank. I like to call it his lawn since he is obsessed with keeping it pristine. There's a reason why 90% of the plants in the tank are at the front and not the back. I have 2 different species of these little guys, and while I wasn't able to catch it on film, they do like to hang out with the peppered Cory and will school with him at the bottom every now and again. Typically, I find them all over the tank swimming around looking for something to munch on. If I could, I would have a tank full of just pygmy Corys. So, did I buy these guys? Of course not, but as soon as I saw the first, I knew there were many more to come. These little guys can reproduce very quickly and are a great part of the cleanup crew. They love to eat any of the leftovers from the fish and also help process all of the waste within the substrate. Honestly, it's hard to not want to sit and just watch this tank all day. On to one of the smallest tanks I have. This little tank sits right behind where I sit at my desk, so I typically have my face right up to the glass when I'm taking a look. And honestly, you gotta get pretty close to really appreciate these little guys. Now, with this tank being only 3 gallons, it's really not a permanent setup for any fish, but for Least-Keely babies, it's a perfect little tank to grow in for a little bit. Least-Keelys typically leave their fry alone, and you don't really have to worry about separating them from the parents, but I like to keep them in here for at least a little bit so I can, well, watch them. I want to see them be cute all day long, and it's easier for me to find them in this tiny little tank. Let's move on to the permanent residents of the tank. If you don't like snails, we can't be friends. Just kidding. But in all seriousness, I used to think snails like these guys were pests, but for a long time now, I've embraced them as a must-have in all of my tanks. Not only do snails provide you with endless slow-motion entertainment, they also play a key role in breaking down the waste that occurs within the tank. And of course, gotta have the shrimp. Can't have a tiny planted tank without shrimp. These little guys thrive in this setup and are also very skilled at cleaning people. Clearly, I haven't done much with the plants in here. The substrate is only sand and the plants mostly being moss and other low-maintenance species. I don't do much besides remove some every now and again. It might not be the prettiest or most scaped tank, but it's honestly one of my favorites. If you've watched my video about quitting my job, this tank should look familiar to you. That video showed me bringing this tank back from a very neglected state after a hard period in my life. Now, when I originally set up this tank, I also had a specific fish in mind that I'd never kept before. There are about 30 in here, and you will see this fish show up in a couple of my other tanks because, holy moly, when I first got them, I could not get them to stop breeding. I actually steered clear of CPDs for many years, only because I had a preconceived notion that they were more sensitive fish, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to provide them with the right care. A normal person would have sold them. I did not. I honestly have the hardest time letting go of the fish I raise, so I try to keep a cap on how much I breed so I don't overstock any one tank. There's also a substantial population of shrimp in here, and as you can see, the orange gene is very strong in these shrimp. I've mixed up this colony with others a couple of times in the past couple of years, and the orange coloration is still the most prominent despite them mixing. These guys are some of the hardest workers when it comes to keeping this tank nice and clean. The best thing about this tank is it's right in front of my bed, so I get the comfiest spot to watch these beautiful little guys. What's better than a big planter pot? A big planter pot full of water and plants and fish. This little pond stays outside year-round and holds another favorite fish of mine. When I first read about rice fish a few years ago, I was surprised I had never heard or seen them before. After watching a few videos, I couldn't get them out of my head. There was something about watching them from above that intrigued me to no end. It was like watching miniature koi swimming around in a little pond. The rice fish in here are almost all raised by me, and you can tell they are pretty used to me having my hands in here for trimming and any other maintenance. I purchased this planter pot from a home goods store, and besides drilling an overflow hole, it didn't need much work before getting it filled and ready for fish. Keeping a small pond like this is honestly a lot like keeping a fish tank, with the exception of dealing with the weather and all of the creatures that can and will visit your pond. As the seasons change, I'm learning more and more the longer I have them going. My current battle is with pond moths and aphids decimating all of my floating plants. This pond was set up not long after the last, since I decided to go back to that same store and get another one. This pond is finally calming down after a recent algae bloom that happened after all of the floating plants were wiped out. Within a week of no floating plants, the sides of the ponds turned green and hair algae started to choke out the rest of the plants. The main way I helped with this was adding shade and replacing the floating plants as often as I can. Although the pond moths are still here, their numbers are a little bit less than earlier in the year, so hopefully they will be gone soon. We don't talk about this one. Just kidding. With so many different tanks, some can get neglected. Now, even though this tank has seen better days, it still continues to grow and has a few residents hiding among all of those plants. This tank houses some of the most vibrant and beautiful shrimp that I have. There are a lot in this tank, and I can tell you now they did not appreciate me removing all of that moss. We also have the shyest fish I currently keep. Now, I bought these guys from a shop that had them labeled as nanofish or something similar, and when I first saw them, they were tiny, silver, and you could only really see a little dot on the tail as far as their patterns. Imagine my surprise after getting them home and seeing them color up as they grew. Even though these guys are still terrified of me, I was able to catch about 20 fry from this tank once they started to breed. There's also one lone ember tetra in here that I wasn't able to catch previously, and he has now joined the School of Emeralds, so here he will remain. This tank obviously is in need of some TLC, and I do have some cool plans for it in the future. This tank was originally set up so I could grow out a whole bunch of plants that I didn't really have space for in other tanks. For months, it pretty much only had plants and a couple of rocks, and that was it. Well, the filter failed at some point, and since there were no fish or shrimp, I kind of just let it sit. I did less and less maintenance until it just stopped. Once I decided to revive the tank, it was covered in algae, and yes, I've said that a million times in this video already. But the first thing that went in was about 50 or 60 little shrimp and a big handful of snails to munch and process the months and months of buildup in the tank. Once it was good to go, I was able to move in the current residents, a whole bunch of least keely fish. Some of these least keelies came from other tanks, but the majority of them are actually wild caught by me. Last year, I went on a road trip to South Florida, and while I was there, I was able to locate them in a public park not far from where I was staying. Have you ever purchased a fishing license only to go and net the tiniest little fish possible? Yeah, it was pretty great getting to explain that to anyone who walked by and asked me about what I was catching. The shrimp and the snails were able to clear out most of the algae, and with a newly fixed filter and a bit of care, the tank has finally started to see some better days. The duckweed at the top will eventually be, well, lessened, but for now it's helping with the algae, and the fish also love to poke around it looking for any microfauna swimming around. This species is seriously so cool, and you need them. You might recognize this tank as well if you've seen my Gundam Garden video. This tank was a lot of fun to escape because any excuse to combine some of my hobbies together in a tank is going to be a good time. While the tank did house some baby rice fish for a few months, they quickly outgrew it and it has since become the Gundam Garden for shrimp. Being only 7 gallons, this tank isn't the largest, so having a nice colony of shrimp as the main residence is really all it needs. Of course, snails too. Can't forget the snails. I would love to do more tanks like this in the future that integrate different elements that aren't typical to planted tanks. This Gundam is only the beginning. Also, how crazy is this backlight setting? So this is actually the oldest tank that I have. I originally got it when I first started college, and it was supposed to be the tank. You know, the kind of tank that is just everything you dreamed it would be after discovering the most beautiful and manicured planted tank on a fish forum. It was the only tank I've ever custom ordered, and I remember having to drive over an hour away to pick it up from a big truck at some random truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Well, college happened, and I didn't put as much time into the tank as I thought I would. This tank has been set up and taken down more times than I can count and has traveled with me over all of these years. After my most recent move, it became a grow-out tank for baby fish and plants, and with that, it's become a bit of a hodgepodge tank at this point. With the exception of the white clouds, all of the fish in here were supposed to have been moved to different tanks. But as all fish keepers know, not all fish are easy to catch. I honestly hate stressing the fish and myself out when I try to catch them, so here is where they will stay until I decide to try and catch them out again. Now this tank doesn't really have much of escape, and in all honesty, the plants haven't done the best since I let the duckweed get out of control a little too often. But this tank is also on my list. I want to make it the tank that I dreamed about all of those years ago. There's just something about shallow tanks. Having the ease of creating an out-of-water area stretches the limits of what you can do with your scape. This tank houses one of my all-time favorite fish, the least keely. My first video on this channel is about this tank and this species, and even now I can't get enough of them. The tank really hasn't changed too much over the past year, and the plants still grow great in and out of the water. Some scuds hitched a ride into this tank at some point, and I haven't noticed any issues with them with the shrimp. I honestly love scuds, and I think they're so goofy and fun to watch swim about the tank. I've removed a good amount of babies and some of the adults from here, and have relocated them to the 29-gallon I showed earlier. This tank is still primarily mostly female, so moving a few out every now and again makes sure I don't have too big of a baby explosion. Not that I need more tanks or ponds, but I would love to do a shallow pond one day full of these little guys. This was originally set up for an alien beta I had last year, but he got sick within 6 months and eventually passed. Even though it didn't work out with him, this tank became home to a group of the CPDs and emeralds that I've raised from the other tanks. While emeralds and CPDs can crossbreed, I haven't seen any fry in this tank. It's pretty dense, and the fish are pretty good at hunting down anything that moves. Of course, there's also a healthy colony of shrimp and snails in here to keep things clean. This tank is definitely one of my favorites when it comes to how easy the plants are to maintain. There are a few stems here and there, but for the most part, it's just microsword and sagittaria, which don't really need to be trimmed like stems do. The overgrown grassy look is one that I will always love with planted tanks. The only thing I would like to add in this tank in the future is maybe some hardscape to break up the foliage a bit. Alright, I know, it's not good. But trust me when I tell you that at one point, this was my most colorful and beautiful tank with a Dutch-style scape. At its peak, this tank was full of fish, I was diffusing CO2, had over 30 different species of plants, and then, well, stuff happens, and now I find myself having to start over. This tank currently has no fish and only houses some snails and shrimp. While the majority of the plants did get choked out by each other, there are still some remaining that I can definitely save with a bit of time and effort. I have a lot of ideas for this tank and really want to bring something new to it, so hopefully stay tuned for a future video on it. Babies, babies, babies. Why can't I stop raising these dang babies? While I've never been a serious breeder with any of my fish, it's just really cool watching these little babies grow from tiny eggs. I limit myself to 3 baby bins for my Madoka now, since I know that I can't just keep growing them until I start giving them away or selling them. These bins are great at being able to observe all of the fry as they grow, and I am more easily able to separate them out as they all get ready to move out to other ponds. I make sure to also have snails in all of these bins to help break down any of the waste produced by the Madoka. Madoka, like koi, don't have stomachs, so this means there's usually a good amount of nutrients left in their poop. The snails help process that waste down further so that they don't produce ammonia within the tank. So while these are not technically functioning ponds for fish, these ponds hold a ton of excess plants from other setups. These are pretty much made up of a ton of trimmings and floating plants, except this one is pretty much only duckweed at this point. But these plants have been out here for over a year, and in that time their roots have taken over everything beneath the surface. The roots are so entangled that even when the pond overflows from rain, none of the plants get spilled out. It is effectively a solid mat of plants on top of each of these ponds. During the warmer months, the frogs and toads flock to them since they are perfect spots for them to lay their eggs. I've seen tadpoles in here multiple times, but with the plants being so overgrown, it's pretty hard to spot them. These little pots are honestly great to have for any plants that I don't want to throw away, and are also a great spot for any bugs or birds to grab a quick drink. This pond is another grow out pond for, you guessed it, rice fish. When I first discovered rice fish a few years ago, I went down a pretty intense spiral of buying containers for them. As long as it held enough water, I was buying it for future rice fish that I didn't even have yet. It holds around 17 gallons and is perfect for raising up the rice fish before they go outside. And of course, you guessed it, I have a bunch of shrimp and snails in here too, as well as some cool little scuds that usually hang out in all of the duckweed. I'm also currently using this pond to grow out some plants on driftwood, like this one. This piece is destined for a tank you may have already seen in this video. Okay, now hear me out. This tank might look a little rough, but it is absolutely teeming with life. This tank was originally set up as a holding/grow-out tank for baby rice fish. Big surprise, I know. And it's been a few months since they've been moved out. In that time, not only have shrimp taken over, but it is now full of microfauna. These little guys are pretty freaking cool because not only are they tiny and adorable, but they are always hard at work eating algae, bacteria, and anything dead, helping keeping the tank in balance. These guys are the perfect size to make a great little meal for fries, so for now, I just harvest seed shrimp from here from time to time. I'm happy to let this tank stay as is until I have some more babies to raise. Everyone in this tank works to keep it in balance. From the microfauna to the shrimp and the snails, this little tank is truly a tiny little thriving ecosystem. Seriously, how is nature so cool? Ah yes, another mini pond, but this one is missing something key. I've been growing out this pond for a few months now, and it's taken all of the power in me to not just put more rice fish in here. I know there are so many amazing fish out there that would thrive in a little pond like this, so I'm going to stay strong. It's been cycled for a few months and fish are ready to go in. I just have to figure out what kind. I've honestly just been enjoying growing all of these different plants, as some of them came from some of the more neglected tanks you saw in this video. Since there are no fish in here yet, the microfauna is booming, and anything that goes in here will definitely have the best welcome feast ever. For now, it will continue to grow until I decide on what fish to put in here. If you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. Last but certainly not least, we have the biggest setup I have to date, the stock tank pond. This tank already has a video on it, but quite a bit has happened since that video was uploaded. The water feature I originally put together worked wonderfully until the tube slipped out one day and the summer heat dried and burned the majority of the moss within a few hours. Now, I don't think this moss is all dead for good, so for now I'm just going to see if I can get it to recover. The algae issues I had previously are almost all gone, with the exception of the base of the pot and the filter fountain head. The rice fish in here have done really well, and I've even seen some smaller fish, so they have successfully bred in here without any intervention from me. This pond is honestly the spot to be if you are, well, a bee. Every morning and afternoon, the pond is filled with bees. Sometimes as many as 30 or 40 bees will be hanging out here to grab a drink and buzz around the plants nearby. While it can be a little intimidating sometimes, I am honestly so happy that the pond can not only be a nice refuge for the wildlife in my garden, but a beautiful home for these awesome fish. So yeah, I have just a few setups, like one or two. If you have any questions about any of them, I would love to chat with you in the comments and hear about your tanks too. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.